So we all pretend we live in this world of evidence-based medicine. The problem is, if all the evidence is corrupt, then evidence-based medicine is also going to be corrupt. So if all your evidence is produced by pharmaceuticals, is produced by people getting paid by the sugar industry, for example, well, you're going to think sugar is fine. And we have studies that prove that funded studies, so if you fund a study, then you're like something like 6 to 10 times more likely to find a result favoring your sponsor. Well, that's just human nature. So we have a guy in Toronto, a Dr. Stephen Piper, who is out there all the time saying sugar's good, fructose is good, it's like a health food. And then, of course, in the newspaper, in the National Post last year, which is our national newspaper, it's like, oh yeah, he takes hundreds of thousands of dollars from the sugar industry, Coca-Cola and everybody. I'm like, okay. Here's the sugar industry funding the University of Toronto, which is happily taking all this cash, they're taking all this money, and producing shoddy research. The sugar company, or the pharmaceutical, or the big food company, I don't blame them at all. Because their responsibility is to sell sugary beverage. The problem is that we allow Coke to pay the University of Toronto millions of dollars to produce crappy research. I understand this, everybody understands this. So therefore, nobody is allowed to give policemen, nobody's allowed to give judges anything. But we say, oh yeah, but if you're a big company, you can give doctors however much money you want. So you look at a journal like the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, and the editors, which decide which journals get published, what everything is, on average, they're taking each over $400,000 a year. The question is, why do we allow that to happen? You can't give $400,000 to a New York Times journalist. They will get fired. But yet, when it comes to our health, we say, hey, Dr. Stephen Piper, you can take, here's $500,000. Just do some research on why sugar's good for you. And he produces it. And then people come out and say, well, the evidence says that sugar's good for us. Isn't that the most ridiculous situation you've ever heard? What we have to do is we have to be on our, political, we have to get political and really say, okay, we shouldn't be allowing any of this. Anybody who teaches students, medical students, teaches at the university, is not allowed to take money. They pay editors of large journals like hundreds of thousands of dollars each to get their research into it. The studies are all produced by drug companies, and we know that if that's the case, then it's far more likely to be biased. The first thing we should be doing is saying we need new rules. Nobody's allowed to pay university professors any kind of money. You want to be a university professor, you want the privilege of teaching medical students, you get paid by the university. You don't get paid by anybody else. If you want to write guidelines, clinical guidelines for diabetes, clinical guidelines for dietary guidelines, whatever it is, anybody who writes any kind of guideline is not allowed to take money from anybody. Because doctors are the worst, because they take lots of money from everybody, and they think that just disclosing it is fine. It's like, I don't care if you say it, don't do it. So you go to these lectures, and they're terrible because we have financial disclosure slides, and so anytime you go to any lecture, somebody will flash up a slide, and there's like 15 drug companies on it that he's been paid by. And he goes, and he'll always say something like, I'm not biased because I'm paid by everybody, and everybody laughs. In any other sphere of life, it would be completely unacceptable. If I knew my teacher, my child's teacher was being paid by Coke, and hey, teaches them that Coke is okay. But yet, Coke can pay Dr. Stephen Piper lots of money to come out and say, hey, sugar's good for you. Then he teaches the medical students, hey, sugar's good for you. Which teaches you that sugar is good for you. And then you get diabetes and die. There's something very wrong there. We need the same rules as everybody else. And the health of the sort of whole nation sort of depends on it. We have so many of these researchers that are just on the payroll. There's the former editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet. These are the two sort of most prominent medical journals in the world, who have both said, yeah, after like 20 years of being in the business, I realized that it's all crap.
Yeah.
Most of what we publish is not true. There's this replication bias, where people try and juice up their findings so that it gets in the newspapers, and then when they try and replicate the study, it's like, oh, it wasn't true at all. Editors-in-chief, the guys who have been there and done that and lived that life, they've all basically turned their back and said, it's all just crap now. You can't have a drug company doing a study on their own drug. Logic seems to sort of play no role in what we do. That is, you can't allow drug companies to do their own study and then tout their own horn and then dictate how we do medicine. You've given it up. And why? Because our leaders, our university professors, are all on the payroll. From a health standpoint, honestly, it's metabolic syndrome, obesity, type 2 diabetes. That's clearly going to be the issue of our times.
Yeah.
It's killing tons of people. Cardiovascular disease, stroke, cancer. Those are the biggest sort of 3 killers of Americans, and they're all sort of metabolic problems. Going to the sort of standard medical dogma is not great for the related issue of a lot of bias in medicine research. The good news is that you can take control of your own health, do the cutting out processed foods, reducing the number of times that you eat, intermittent fasting, and sort of regain sort of 90% of your health. The larger societal issue is to get the bias out of medical science.